Hello and welcome back. So, I was hoping to not be doing another thing about talking about camera gear and actually start getting into talking about workflow and tips and stuff like that. But apparently Canon just doesn't want to let me do that this week. So, this is a little bit of a rant. I'm not quite sure where the rant falls, but it is definitely a little bit of a rant. So, Canon announced one of their, I think it was Canon Europe something or other, said that Canon was no longer going to be developing new EF lenses. Their focus was now on RF, and that the not that they were stopping production of EF lenses, but that they weren't developing new EF lenses. And of course, the internet being the way the internet is, everybody and their brother who runs a website needs to have a sensationalized headline that says something like Canon stops EF lenses or something like that. And lots of people get bent out of shape because they don't read the article, they just read the misleading headline that's there to generate clicks, and that's where things go. Now, on one hand, I don't really have a problem with that. What Canon's doing, stopping the development of new EF lenses. They have said that they are going, or that this is pursuant to the demands of the market. So if the market demands new EF lenses, then they will obviously develop new EF lenses, but that they want to focus on the RF platform and mirrorless cameras and da 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 da. And as I said, on one hand, I don't really have a problem with this. Why? Canon already has a massive platform in EF lenses. They have coverage from 11 millimeters or 8 millimeters if you go fisheye, all the way to 800 millimeters. There isn't a whole lot that they need to do or that they need to produce new lenses of. I know there's going to be some people who are frustrated or disappointed that they won't be producing a 24 to 70 f2.8 with image stabilization or something to that effect, but by and large, Canon lenses sort of cover the gamut of what you need. And if you're looking at L lenses, they are all pretty good. I mean, there's nothing that's super glaringly obvious, screaming, you don't really want you want to get off this platform because this lens that's fairly important doesn't exist on it or is crap. So the demand for new EF lens designs, and I mean designs, not lenses, because Canon is still manufacturing new EF lenses. They're just not they're just not putting the effort into or the resources into designing new EF designs. So I can understand that, and I'm not terribly bent out of shape about it. What there becomes a rant is going to mirrorless. So I'm decidedly on the fence when it comes to mirrorless. There's things, I mean, it's not like I don't understand the technology. It's not like I don't understand the benefits of switching to mirrorless or having a mirrorless camera. But there are instances, and especially in some of the photography I do with wildlife, where I spend a long time looking through the viewfinder, waiting for something the moment to happen, where a mirrorless camera is not a pure, straight-up benefit to me. It can do the same job, potentially just as well as a DSLR in theory, right up to the point of power consumption. And that's one aspect of mirrorless cameras that has me sort of on the fence, is they still use a lot more power than a DSLR does just looking through the camera, because you don't have an optical viewfinder, and so there's no path to just look through the camera. But where this becomes the rant and why this is so frustrating is what Canon's doing with their mirrorless cameras, or rather, not what they're doing per se, but what's not being said. So a number of years ago, Vincent Laforet wrote an article about, I think it was Vincent Laforet, wrote an article about why camera companies, it's a good thing that they're secretive about their products, what's coming. And his argument was that with Apple, who he used as an example, is secretive about their products generally, if they have to slip a release date, nobody knows. Like, the only people who know that the iPhone blah 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 was not, was supposed to be released on, say, October 1st, and it ended up being released on November 1st, are employees of Apple. There's no announcement situation that's created that can create backlash because a lot of demanding consumers are pissed off that they can't get their new iPhone on the time when they expected that they should be getting their new iPhone, or something to that effect. And his counterpoint was, he was talking about Red, who had, at the time, had announced a camera, and then they couldn't make the release because they had some more technical issues to work out with the camera, and the camera eventually released, so it's not like it didn't make it to market. And there was wailing and gnashing of teeth of people who wanted their new red camera or something on time. And, his argument was that by not publishing release schedules or timetables, companies like Apple have a much better control of the message around their thing. And subsequent to his article or whatever it was, I wrote an article where I said, well, the problem though is, by and large, phones are kind of inexpensive, relatively inexpensive. Now, they've gotten a lot more expensive since I wrote that article, but at the time you could get a new phone for $300 or $400, $500 for a fairly high-end one. Now we're talking about cameras, and a professional DSLR in the sort of 5D or D750 or Sony A7 tier costs $2,000 to $3,000, or $2,000 to $3,500, and a full-on professional DSLR like a 1DX or a Nikon D5 costs between $5,000 and $7,000. This is not chump change market or money for a lot of people. And my argument at the time was, because there's no roadmap and there's no way to plan, it becomes difficult to reasonably budget, for a lot of us at least, reasonably budget how we're going to allot funds for new gear. Because, if we buy an EOS R now and next week Canon announces the EOS R Mark II, all of a sudden we have this camera that's appreciatively depreciated in value simply because it's being replaced. Now, I also want to note that it is true that if you announce a new product too soon, before you're ready to actually release it, then you can hurt your own sales because people say, well, I'm going to just wait for this product to come out. And this has happened in a number of industries. It's especially dangerous for small companies where announcing their next generation something too early, even though they didn't think it was too early, kills the sales of their current generation product, and then that kills their cash flow, and then they go out of business. But anyway, what's frustrating to me here is the whole EOS R situation. So right now, all but 2 of the EOS R or RF mount lenses are L lenses. Most of them are professional lenses, and the vast majority of those lenses have a price tag above $2,000. They're $2,500, $3,000 lenses. So we're talking serious professional level kit here, at least in my opinion. I would call this serious professional level kit. There are some less expensive lenses, but, and there's 2 non-L lenses, but the vast majority of the current RF platform is L lenses. What there isn't in the R platform or the RF platform or whatever you want to call it is an L camera. The 2 cameras that Canon has brought to market, the EOS RP and the EOS R, are decidedly entry-level cameras. And I know when I say this, I'm probably going against the perception of an awful lot of people, because when I read and look at reviews and discussions, I see a lot of people who have the mental picture in their head that because the EOS R uses the same sensor or very, very similar sensor to the sensor in the EOS 5D Mark IV, that the R and the 5D Mark IV are equivalent cameras. And because the RP uses the same sensor as the 6D, the RP and the 6D are equivalent cameras. However, when you really dig into the feature sets in these cameras, the RP is like a rebel. It's a decidedly entry-level camera. And the R is not, it does not have the same feature set as the 5D Mark IV across a whole slew of areas. User interface, controls, video shooting features and capabilities. It's limited to UHD and not DCI 4K, for example. There's places where there's some convergence and some crossover, but there's a number of important aspects in the EOS R that, as far as I'm concerned, make it a down-tiered camera. It's in my mind, looking at the feature sets, and this is what I think is important when you look at a camera. You can't just look at the sensor and say, well, it's got the same sensor as this. You have to look at the feature sets. In my mind, looking at the R line right now, you have an RP, which is a essentially digital Rebel full-frame mirrorless camera, but it's on the same tier as the Rebels. It's just obviously full-frame and mirrorless. So entry level. And you have the R, which is decidedly the enthusiast level full-frame mirrorless camera. It's on the same tier as the 6D in the DSLR space. It's not a professional camera. And there's something, Canon's been trying some interesting things with the R, the touch bar, etc. But, when push comes to shove, like I said, it's not an equivalent to, say, my 5D Mark IV. And over Christmas, Canon had some tremendously good deals. I could have gotten a Canon factory refurbished, certified with a full 1-year warranty, etc. EOS R for like $1,200. They run, I think, close to $2,000 list. The $1,200 is a substantial discount. Now, it's a refurb, it's not a new camera, but I'm not tremendously, Canon stands behind their refurbs, and I'm not tremendously concerned that anymore that my camera is new and not, something that's factory recertified or refurbished. And I've been on the fence about the EOS R. I've been on the fence about the EOS R for a long time, and I've been sitting there going like, well, should I, shouldn't I, etc. And I flat out didn't get one because flat out the camera doesn't have the features and capabilities that I rely on. And some of this stuff I'm going to have videos coming up on, so a lot of it has to do with the user interface, especially regarding rear button autofocus, which is a big deal for me. It's something I use constantly, and not having the capability of having two independently configured and programmed rear button autofocus modes would be a major annoyance to me in a new camera. But so Canon has these entry and enthusiast level mirrorless cameras. They don't have a professional one. They're not talking about the professional one. I mean, last year, and I think it was November, they made some talk, they talked about the upcoming 1DX Mark III, and then just recently, I guess it was 2 days ago, I posted a video. Last week, they made the announcement, the actual formal announcement of the EOS 1DX Mark III. And there's sort of there's sort of an understanding of what we can expect in a professional level Canon DSLR. They have a history, there's a track record, you can look at what they've done in past models, and you can assume, because they haven't ever done this, they're not going to radically diverge into some new user interface design paradigm that just doesn't work well, or is just totally different, that's a completely new kind of thing to do. What we don't have from Canon, though, is, as they talk about the future, and RF is the future, and mirrorless, and blah, 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 what we don't have from them is any indication what their plan is when it comes to a professional-level mirrorless camera's physical user interface. Because, quite frankly, the now 4-year-old or almost 4-year-old sensors in my 5D Mark IVs are sort of more than adequate for what I'm trying to do with cameras. I'm perfectly happy with the pictures, and I'm in no big rush to upgrade or replace my 5D Mark IVs just for the sake of getting a new camera. That said, I want to go mirrorless at some point. Mirrorless is definitely got some advantages that would be really nice to have. I'd like some better video recording capabilities, because the situation on the Mark IV is basically I can either shoot 1080p, or I can shoot 1080p, which is all I really end up shooting, or I can shoot 4K and burn through cards like nobody's business and then spend forever and a day transcoding the 500 megabit files down to something that I can actually deal with and store in a reasonable way in my environment. So I'd like some other options there. I'd like a UHD crop, maybe, not necessarily, but certainly would be nice. But anyway, their Canon, in not having really even broached the topic of what's going on with a professional mirrorless camera, it's this big open question. Okay, sure, they got really nice lenses. Okay, sure, they're going to be putting all of their efforts going forward in lens design into RF mirrorless camera lenses. And I'm sure they're going to have an awful lot of really, really good lenses, because that seems to be what Canon's gotten really good at doing, is producing really good lenses. But the camera thing leaves a huge open question for me. It's, what are they going to do? Are they going to actually come out with a mirrorless version of the 5D Mark IV that sort of matches the feature sets that I have in my DSLR, adapted to, where necessary, to a mirrorless camera? Are they going to go off in some other direction with weird touch controls? I mean, there just was a patent recently. Now, patents do not mean that that's what they're going to do. It's just something that they've developed and are protecting. But there was a patent recently for a mirrorless camera with a full touch screen back, which to me is like, I don't even want to think about that. That's the kind of camera you have to hold out like this, because the physical user interface just goes to heck when you try to implement everything in touch, and it's as a touch interface. But so the whole point here of this rant, I guess, is I want Canon needs to come out and start talking about what they're doing with a professional level mirrorless camera. If that's going to be the future, and it's hard to argue that mirrorless isn't going to be the future, we need to start seeing from Canon where they're planning on taking this, because there's things you can do in a consumer level camera that become problematic in a professional level camera, and there's features that you can leave out in a consumer level camera that are useful or necessary in a professional level camera, and we just don't have that information. The Canon isn't talking about it. There's obviously the whole secrecy thing around that camera companies don't like to talk about their cameras before they're released. And at this point, like in December, as I said, I could have gotten an EOS R for essentially a song and a dance, and I didn't, because what are they going to announce? Like, I don't want to throw away $1,200 to a camera that I'm going to have to sell at a pretty penny loss probably in 2 or 3 months, because they come out with an actual professional level mirrorless camera. So there you go. I really think we need to start seeing some, I don't want to say transparency, something from the camera companies that talks about like what it is they're actually planning on releasing, or at least did Canon, because, as I said, this is a transition period. They're moving to a new platform. Things are going to change. Technology's getting updated, and it really would help if, even if we don't have all the specs and all the information, it would really help if we knew kind of where their thought process or when they were planning on getting to things, just as a sort of general guide, or at least it would really help me. So thanks for watching. If you found this rant ranty enough, please smash the like button. For more content on video and camera technology and what's developing in the camera industry to a certain extent, although I try to focus more on technology and whatnot, please subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're interested in written content, please check out my website at www.pointsinfocus.com. I'll put a link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and until next time.